Maryland's next legislative session begins January 9th, the 439th session for Maryland. Pretty impressive history-wise. So let's hear from members of the Lower Shore Delegation about some of the hot-button issues they'll be dealing with. Do we have everybody we're working on? Here comes Addie. Representing District 37, which includes Caroline, Talbot, Dorchester, and Wycomico counties, we have Senator Addie Eckert. Come on up, Addie.
Right here.
We're missing another. Okay. We'll skip Mary Beth for now. From District 38A, which includes Somerset and Worcester counties, Delegate Charles Otto. From District 37B, Caroline, Talbot, Dorchester, and Wycomico counties, Delegate Johnny Mounts. District 37A, which includes Dorchester and Wycomico counties, Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes. District 37B includes Caroline, Talbot, Dorchester, and Wycomico counties, Delegate Chris Adams. District 38B, which includes Wycomico County, Delegate Carl Anderton. District 38C, which includes Wycomico and Worcester counties, Delegate-elect Wayne Hartman. And what happened to our Senator-elect? She's here. We're going to introduce her anyway, and we'll give her a big standing O when she comes in. District 38, Wycomico, Worcester, and Somerset counties, Senator-elect Mary Beth Carosa. I'm going to step aside now and turn it over to our moderator, Greg Riddell, who's the co-chair of the Chamber's Government and Business Affairs Committee. Have a seat, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Beth Carosa. If you looked a little further, you saw a National Realtor publication, trade publication, talking about Salisbury being a leader in real estate development. Exogen Energy discussing how the Delmarva Peninsula is on the cutting edge of economic growth, and that's again in the front pages. But in order to get to any of that, what you had to do is look past the headlines, and depending on the perspective, either Trump is the devil or Trump's heavenly. But overwhelming every other issue that we discuss is politics. So with that in mind, we're going to open up a discussion for our new Lower Shore delegation to discuss how politics will impact the future of the Delmarva Peninsula and the impacts it'll have on us in 2019. So to start very broadly, we'll just start with Senator Eckert and go down the line. We have a new delegation. We have a new session coming up. What are your plans to make a difference in Annapolis in 2019?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's help as we got through the campaign. And so now we do look forward to a brand new session. This is going to be a phenomenal session because this is going to be the greatest turnover that we have had, I think, since I was elected in 1994. Many of our strong leaders, at least in the Senate of Maryland, were not reelected for various reasons. So there are a number of new leaders in those positions. And we were fortunate. We're the only caucus, I think, in the Northeast who gained Republican seats. So we're really fortunate to have new members, and that brings new expertise. And it's very exciting because we do have a number of folks who are very well informed in their profession or business area. And I think that's going to make a big difference because those folks have been strategically placed on committees in the Senate.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with you this afternoon, and I want to also thank all those who were involved in putting together the Delmarva Economic Forecast. the information that was provided earlier is always shared with us. When we talk about moving forward, I think that we should all be thinking with our various roles, whether business, nonprofit, organization, two themes for the upcoming session and the priorities that we have at the local level when it comes to jobs and the economy and economic development. Partnerships and balances. Partnerships at every level, talking local, state, federal, nonprofits, private sector. So when we come up with these different priorities, we know that we're working through them at every level, and we're building that consensus. Balance is going to be absolutely critical. We've got to approach these policies, legislation in a balanced way. So that will be my approach coming into the Senate.
Thank you very much. I'm State Delegate Chris Adams. I'm a fifth-generation Eastern Shoreman, a third-generation small business owner. I ran in 2014 as an upset business owner that was affected deeply by our state of Maryland. Went to Annapolis, appealed to the legislature to make law change, had that happen, and saw very few business owners. You can hold up one hand and count the number of business owners that operate in Annapolis as a legislator. So now, 4 years later, what I'll say to you is I ran upset. I remain upset with many of the things that happened in Annapolis. What I've done in my first 4 years is do the very best I can to represent the business owner, advocate for low taxes, light regulation, try to create a welcoming environment for citizens that come to the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and specifically in my district. Let me just say real quickly, when I came into the legislature, the leadership created what was called the Augustine Commission Report. And the legislature, through this, and I call this best practices, us as business owners call this, what do you do as a legislature to help business community? We passed 4 bills in the first year and then 1 tax bill the following year. We need to continue taking these proposals and move forward, and I will strongly support those initiatives.
Hey, how y'all doing? Hold on, I guess I got to stand up. Y'all gonna sit down and act like you got this food coma going on after lunch. How y'all doing? All right. Good. Thank you so much for letting me come hang out with y'all today. We have a great delegation sitting here in front of you. 4 years ago, we all went to Annapolis, tried our best to learn how to get things done. You know, I had a different approach, I guess, than many folks. You know, I went and built relationships to try to work with folks from across the aisle and across the chambers, and working with the governor, the speaker, the Senate president to get some interesting things done through the budget. We're going to look to continue that. We're probably going to be moving to a new committee, so that'll bring new challenges with it. But I just wanted to say, you know, I'm looking at Senator Eckert, Senator Carrozza, Delegate Adams, this guy right here, Delegate Johnny Malt, Delegate Otto, Delegate Sample Hughes. We're all on very different committees, but very strong on those committees. I think of healthcare. I think of Delegate Sample Hughes. She's my go-to on that. You know, environment, transportation with Charles Otto, the business climate issues with Johnny and Chris, and we don't know where Wayne's going, but he'll have fun there too. So, but again, I just want to say thank you very much. We're going to continue to build on the foundation that we have laid together.
Don't make me break out the obnoxious buzzer now, Carl.
I had to finish, everybody.
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity of being here. I'm going to ask now in April when we come back if you could sit me somewhere other than next to Carl. I'd appreciate it. But the last 2 days we were in Annapolis, Mary Beth and I, for orientation for new legislators. And I think it's apparent the first task up there is creating relationships. As a former councilman in Ocean City, I believe that whatever decisions we can keep here on the local level are always best for us. You know, every county's not created equal. What works on the other side of the bridge doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work here. So local level decisions are going to be a big thing for me. I think, you know, the number one thing we could do is just keep lessening regulation and try to keep ourselves on a level playing field with our neighbors in Delaware and Virginia. So look forward to serving and looking forward to being back telling you about our successes in April. Thanks.
You got to give that back to Carl.
Can't have everything.
Hello, everybody. This is Johnny Mounts. Johnny Mounts, and Carl needed to take his microphone back. We were having a little joke about that. We're going to be playing games with Wayne because this will be his first term, and we've all been there. So I'm really excited about going back to Annapolis. You know, I ran for office 4 years ago. I'm a small business owner also. My family, I grew up in our family restaurant. And I ran because I was concerned about some things that were happening. I've been blessed over the last 4 years to have a lot of success and then learn some lessons. To me, I mean, we as a business community have to be active and we have to engage. That includes drawing the line and standing by the things that are important to us, but also to reach across the aisle and continue to work with all of our colleagues, the people that have helped us along the way. For me, in my first term, I spent a lot of time in Annapolis. I plan to spend much more time here at home this coming term. Our strength is you, everyone in this room, and we need your support. There's a lot of changes going on. There's a lot going on throughout the community, and we have to engage. That's my buzzer.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm Charles Otto. I'm the senior delegate, I guess, on the delegation now. I didn't know how that happened so quick in 2 terms, but we do have a tremendous change in General Assembly this year. It was alluded to earlier. 41 members of the General Assembly, or the House of Delegates, out of 141 are going to change this year. And 18 senators out of 47. Now, some of those did serve in the House of Delegates, so they have some legislative experience. So that's going to be a learning curve. But thank goodness for our delegation, we have some experience here, and we didn't have the turnover that we saw in other parts of the state. And hopefully with that experience, we can maintain and bring forth the issues and values that our area stands for and maintain that regional responsibility. John hit it on it, McClellan earlier on the real estate, commercial real estate thing, are working in the region and working together because we're few, but we can be mighty. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes. What I look forward to and continue to do is to keep the citizens of my district engaged and aware of what is going on in the district. So prior to going to Annapolis, I've already set a community meeting on December the 12th in the district, and that again is to ensure that they are aware of what is being proposed so they can be at the ready to know when we need testimony and need assistance in Annapolis. Just to make you aware, I am currently serving as the president of the Women's Caucus, so I'll be able to lead a group of women in the Maryland State Legislature, 71 strong, this upcoming session. And we have issues that we have before us, but certainly I'll be a voice to be in that movement, if you will. I currently also serve on the Black Caucus, and I'm going to continue to ensure the equity in our businesses, in our environmental issues, and many other issues that we deal with as a state, but more particularly on the Eastern Shore. I find myself often having to educate my colleagues from the Western Shore what's going on the Eastern Shore so we can continue to thrive in various industries. So I'm going to continue to build those relationships, be able to be that voice for the Eastern Shore, and be the one to make things happen along with my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, for this next question, why don't we switch it up and we'll start with Delegate Sample Hughes. She can go twice in a row and come back the other direction. Mandatory paid leave or earned leave is now the law of the land. The Maryland Chamber estimates that law will cost 13,000 jobs in Maryland over the next 10 years. What would you say to a single mother who recently lost her job as a result of this legislation because her employer had to let her go in order to reduce costs?
Thank you. So let me be clear here that I supported the legislation. I support it for various reasons. Earned leave is where you have earned your leave literally to be able to allow you to take the time off, to be able to go to a doctor's appointment, take care of your loved one, where any one of us at any given time would not ever know whether or not they need to be in that capacity. I found myself in that position and still to this day, making sure, and thankfully I have the flexibility to be there to take care of my son and for his many surgeries. So your hypothetical question here with regards to a single mother, I would say this. I said, you know, just like the GM plant closed in White Marsh, we had no idea that that was going to close. But what we are doing in the state of Maryland, we are looking to other industries to hopefully come forward and continue to thrive so we can get the single mother employed. Also making her aware that minorities are leading the charge or leading the way in the brewing industry, the cannabis industry. So there are other entities and areas where I'm going to continue to navigate, connect her to those resources and ensure that she is viably employed.
Continue on. Delegate Hughes and Sample Hughes and I have different views on this, and I find it difficult to mandate things on small businesses when you got 4 or 5 people employed, and then the strategies of seasonal work in Ocean City and the tourism industry and students. I don't like mandating those things, but I think we did have some common ground on some legislation that could have been put forth, but it got all tied up in big politics, and that's unfortunate. I think there will be probably make some revisions made to the existing law to make it a little more accommodating to employers and to the employees. We got a tremendous record-keeping nightmare now for employers that's just going to be more expensive than what the truck is.
Yes, and this is legislation that came through our committee. We worked on it and tried to do what we could to try to change this legislation, but I wouldn't have much to offer in consolation to anyone who lost their position because of a new law. It's very unfortunate, and I think if that situation does play out, this is a hypothetical, I think it could have been avoided if some things were done with that law. My understanding from talking to many of the employers in Salisbury that it would have a greater impact on the seasonal workers and the college students and so forth as opposed to a single mom, but there are plenty of single moms who are just entering the workforce. We do have workforce training. We do have different things going on in the economy which are supposed to fill the gaps, but the reality is when you fall in a gap, there isn't anyone there to catch you, and it's a really tough spot to be in. So I would try to help any way I could, but it's unfortunate.
Well, I'm going to avoid the hypothetical part of it. As you know, I wasn't there, wasn't part of it. As a councilman, though, I know I didn't support the bill or the impacts of it. It had a fiscal impact to not only businesses but government as well. I think our business owners know best what they need to offer to their employees as far as retaining or attracting the right caliber of employee for their business. A lot of business owners already offered something similar, but now they have the nightmare on top of keeping track and meeting all of the components of it. And I think it just complicated things. So I can say I think with our seasonal businesses here, I would like to see some modifications to it. I would certainly fight for that, a seasonal exemption, or at least increasing the number of days. I think a lot of our seasonal businesses are going to feel the impact even more this next season because as their seasonal employees return, that clock is starting where those employees left off, whether it's 99 days, 104 days. So the impacts are going to be felt bigger.
Okay, when I saw this question, I immediately thought of something that had already happened, so I don't really have to go into too much of a hypothetical situation. I have people who call me who lose their jobs, for one thing or another. And so, I would do in this hypothetical situation what I do in real life. And as I've met with these folks that this has happened to, I can think of 3 instances right off the top of my head. And then we go find something that would interest them. I reach out to one of you, which I've already done, and they use me as a personal reference, and then we find them employment somewhere else to the best of our ability. And so we're 3 for 3, and so if this actually becomes reality, we'll do the same thing. We'll find a way to make sure that they can maintain the quality of life that they're used to.
So what I would say to the mom is I'm a business owner. I heard you in my committee, Economic Matters Committee. We killed this bill for 3 of the 4 years I was in office. This bill was brought 2 years before I came into office. Independent polling showed 73% of Marylanders supported the bill. Democrats used that as the weapon to actually get this passed. Let me just tell you what the polling also said. What happens if you as a business owner have to cut benefits or cut jobs? What's your support level then? It drops all the way down to 23%. That is the story that's not being told often enough. And frankly, this is the fight that we have on the Eastern Shore. It is a Democrat-led legislature that ignored, and frankly, insulted us as business owners by saying, we're going to write your employee manual. That is offensive to me for most people. And then as a business person who's got to make satisfactory the relationship I have with bankers, with my employees as I pay my bills, I've got to be profitable. So what happens? I will have to reduce benefits. I will have to adjust how I hire. That's me. I'm just one employer of 36. Thousands of employers across the state are making these decisions. We've got to, as a legislature, walk back this political maneuver.
I'll go back to the my general theme of balance. I took this question as that the story continues. With the paid sick leave bill, I go back to our job creators. We should have factored in their sensitivities as job creators and had a bill that you could strike that balance. Governor Hogan actually did introduce a bill that would have struck the better balance. That's not the bill that passed, which is why I voted against it. Next session, looking ahead, I think you're going to see some of the advocates that are actually going to try to open up the paid leave bill even more, maybe going from 5 to 7 days. You'll also have some of us who are going to be looking for some common sense relief to make the law more manageable for our job creators, specifically using the word job creators because of the way this question was written. So when you talk to employers, they want to do what's right. They know their biggest asset are their people. So let's have more trust when we work through our regulatory policies, and let's have more trust in our employers who know their best asset are their people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, when somebody's evicted or loses a job and they call our office, we try to connect them to the resources so they can move on with their lives. For me, this whole issue is really in your laps right now. How you as businesses have responded to it, how it impacts your business practices, as you've heard all up and down the row, and how you communicate that to us, because each year we get an opportunity to go back and review what was done the time before and then tweak it, if you will, modify it, and that's what we need to hear. Trucking industry, we heard that this morning. They have to adhere to different regulations in different states all of the time. So how does that impact them? How does it impact, again, different seasonal employers? And how we go about taking that information from you and then translating that into amendments in the existing legislation is critical.
Thank you all. On this next one, why don't we start with Delegate Anderton, and then we'll come up the row this way and then back down to Delegate Sample Hughes.
Sure, right on.
You're so cooperative, thank you. Among new employees, it seems in Maryland in general and in the Eastern Shore particularly, when it comes to a legislative session, we as a business community are playing defense, not offense. As this rears its head again, we anticipate seeing an employer mandate that will be introduced in the 2019 session. There'll be a minimum wage increase. There will be predictive scheduling legislation that'll be harmful on businesses that particularly depend on entry-level employees. What position will you take on each of those pieces of legislation?
All right. Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for letting me go first. Maybe. So minimum wage is what, 10.10 now? We just got there, literally just got there. And already, you know, they're talking about going to $15 an hour. Some people are saying $27 an hour as a minimum wage. Wow, you know, I've never made $27 an hour, so that'd be cool. You know, however, you know, it seems like an arbitrary number just constantly gets chosen, you know. So a crazy idea is, you know, why wouldn't you just have your minimum wage indexed by the CPI? You know, instead of just picking numbers out of the air and just let it kind of do its own thing, you know, kind of like they did with the gas tax. I don't know. However, I can talk a little bit more about the predictive scheduling bill where they want you to have your schedule in advance for 21 days. That does not work in retail or service industry. I managed the AutoZone right down the street from here, and I got my hours from the corporate headquarters 3 days before the new week began. So your hour schedule varied 40 hours a week one way or another, and so there's no way you can have, you know, somebody's schedule in advance. It's just not practical.
So the Augustine Commission report talked about how Maryland had not nearly reached its potential in 2015 and that we need to increase our entrepreneurial ecosystem. Nothing says increase the entrepreneurial ecosystem than putting unfunded mandates on the business owner to turn around and try to operate profitably and successfully and to grow in our state. Let me just say to you, when I think about laws that the state passes and forces on me as a business owner, it's not just the law, it's how they're going to enforce it. And on predictive scheduling, let me just go down the quick list here and just tell you how bad this is. Back pay and other economic damages, 3 times hourly wages, civil penalties up to $1,000 per employee, treble damages on unpaid leave, punitive damages, legal fees, court costs, injunctive relief, and, quote, any other relief the court deems appropriate. Does that seem like a responsive piece of legislation, given what our bipartisan Augustine Commission talked about in 2015? It does not, and I can tell you that if the legislature moves forward in that path, they'll do it free of other states like Delaware and Virginia, and we will continue to be at an economic disadvantage when these mandates come through.
Several of us have already been meeting with the Chambers of Commerce, NFIB, the retailers, the Restaurant Association. It's going to be very important that the coalition is put together and is strong because these proposals are devastating to small businesses. When I think back to my mom and dad who had the first fast food drive-through restaurant in Ocean City and gave so many teenagers their first job ever, and to think about how they just couldn't survive now when you think about, when you're talking about the minimum wage increase, when you're talking about predictive scheduling. So we have to be sensitive to how this is actually going to impact not only the job creators, but the employees. It comes back to affecting them both negatively. So I will strongly oppose both of them and work with the coalition.
I could just say ditto. I would agree with all of this. I did not support these. I think it's really important that as business sector, you all know that you have your own standards of practice in place. And there is a way to deal with that, to set that model. But most of business in Maryland is small business. And small business is unfairly impacted by these mandates that I believe are way onerous. So it is important that we all hear from you directly and hear from the organizations to be very clear in our position and then be at the table as these move forward.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
So with regards to the minimum wage, so this is a theory, but I believe it very well could play out given the fact I've done the research and spoken with people in the medical field with regards to the Medicaid rates. Medicaid rates are at a point where they're not going to be able to meet this $15 a wage gap, if you will. So the reimbursement rates, say if you have a patient that is $150 a day, but you're only getting reimbursed at Medicaid rates about $50 a day, then how do you truthfully afford an employee at $15 an hour, okay? So the conversations that I'm having now are with the Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, the conversations that I'm also having with the unions, understanding holistically the issue. Anybody and everybody wants to have livable wages, want to have wages so they can be able to have a good quality of life. So I'm in favor certainly of seeing this trend happen, and the dates I think for this to be effective is like 2024. So we need to look at the whole picture holistically, include all facets of the industries.
Delegate Sample Hughes hit on a couple issues that I agree with much, is that Medicaid reimbursements and the people that it affects, those with disabilities, Dove Point and the Lower Shore Workshop, those are impacted by these minimum wage requirements as well, and unfortunately those folks are not as productive as they would like to be or as employer could pay them to be. Entry-level professions. I mean, we have an opioid problem, and it's not necessarily in the teenage community or younger people, but what opportunity are you giving them when you can't take an opportunity with a teenager to work after school because you're going to have to pay them $15 an hour and you still have to do 3/4 of the work? But how are they going to learn and get forward? That's my position on the issues. And it is a job market. So people are hiring, not based on these mandates.
It's okay, Charles.
The minimum wage is something that came up in our committee. I've got a lot of concerns with it. I don't know what's going to be proposed next year. Last year it came up. My take away from the discussion in our committee was it was not going to pass simply because of the cost to the government. I just asked Delegate Adams what that cost was because I forgot. He couldn't recall either. But it was a crazy number for the state to be able to shoulder the burden. You know, we're in a weird situation right now where we've got record unemployment, and we also have a large amount of government benefits going out. You know, we're at this weird thing where we don't have labor, but we have a lot of benefits going out, and somehow we need to tweak that. I know firsthand that there's some situations where we prevent people from working, and I think we ought to do that rather than force them to live off of a government subsidy. With regard to the predictive scheduling, it's just like the paid sick leave where the government's going in and trying to run a business. It's not going to work, especially for the hospitality industry.
I kind of like better being in the middle. There's not much left to say. You know, kind of like I said earlier with the mandatory paid leave, our business owners know best what they need to pay their employees to retain them or attract new employees. I think if we had a properly trained workforce, minimum wage wouldn't even be an issue. And, you know, I think of my own family. My daughter, when she was 14, she started working at Candy Kitchen in Ocean City. That's certainly not a job that I would think would be worth $15 an hour. So we're hurting those opportunities for different parts of our population. I think it gets down to, you know, career technology training and putting an emphasis on that and having a workforce that can earn a living wage or the wage that, you know, they need. So that wouldn't be a discussion. As far as predictive scheduling, there's no part of it that I'd support. You know, having a small business myself, knowing the challenges coming from a seasonal town especially, there's no way that could be effective.
We'll let you go first on this next one and just
Wait a minute.
be careful what you ask for.
You're on a roll.
And this way we'll go down to Delegate Sample Hughes and then back up to Senator Eckert. Eastern Shore craft brewers continue to tell us how onerous and lopsided in favor of the large beer distributors the current laws are, and that our neighboring states are far more lucrative and entrepreneurial in their regulatory treatment of the craft beer industry. The large distributors allege that, they need regulatory safeguards in place to protect their investment. Will you support legislation to truly grow Maryland's craft beer industry?
I do believe in the craft beer industry. I actually believe it's a different product. So it brings a different market. I think if we don't support it, our neighboring states are going to work around us and we're going to lose that opportunity. So I don't think it's something we could ignore. I think we need to embrace it. I mean, I look back at when I was young of drinking age, the drafts I drank were $1 a piece, and now if we can get $7 out of a draft, I think it's a good thing. So it brings a different market, and I support it.
Dollar draft.
Delegate Mouse?
Oh, me? Wow. I thought it was going the other way. So this bill actually came to our committee last year, and you would think of all you've heard about craft beer that we would have had an in-depth discussion and debated the issues, but we didn't. And we got a bill, and we voted the bill up or down. There were no amendments, and there was no discussion. Craft beer is a great industry. I voted against the bill last year. In retrospect, because of the perception that vote cast, I might have voted a different way. That was part of my lessons learned in my first term. I don't know what legislation is going to be introduced this year, other than the fact that we have several distillers and brewers in our district, 37B. We're heavy on the craft distilling and brewing, and it's important that the issues that are holding them back be resolved immediately so they can continue to grow, and I'm going to support them to do that.
That's all right, Johnny, I have one. This is a tough issue that needs to be worked out between the brewers and the distillers. It came about 2 years ago when Guinness came to Baltimore, and the laws were changed to accommodate them. Now, I don't think that they're considered a craft brewer, I guess, but I don't find them to be my mom and pop operation that I have Great Shoals and Princess Anne or Mount Vernon and the other things that we have evolution here. We were moving in an evolutionary pattern, pardon the pun, to improve those laws for the breweries and the craft breweries. But I have distributors in my district as well that employ more people than the breweries do, and they're important. And I think they have been supportive of the craft brewers, and they need to work together and come up with a solution that is consistent for all the concerns.
So after Delegate Otto has them all worked it out, then I'll come in, because I'm not going to claim to know all about the industry. But I will say this, is that, last year it was a very contentious subject amongst leadership, if I'm just saying that a little lightly. But what we do know, and what I know, is that the industry is thriving and it is producing jobs. In Dorchester County, they're needing to expand. The business is there. I think on yesterday, we got notification that a couple in Hebron, Maryland is going to move to Salisbury to have their business come to fruition. So I'm going to support legislation that's going to increase the growth and increase the productivity, but also going to lean to those who have the understanding in the Economic Matters Committee, some of my colleagues that I serve with from the Western Shore as well, that are going to be leading some of this committee conversation, because this is not in my committee, but I will certainly see the legislation if it comes out of the committee, and then have certainly more of an in-depth conversation and understanding as well.
Senator Eckert?
Thank you very much. As a result of the war that went on between those who hold firmly to the three-tier alcoholic beverage system and those who want to disrupt it, I lost my craft beering promotion fund bill. So I will put it back in this year, because that's one of the incentives we can provide to do more craft brewers around the state, not only here on the Eastern Shore. But there are some significant issues facing the producers and the distributors and the retailers, as you have heard. And I think throughout all of the debate or lack of debate last year, it was pretty much discovered that there are elements of the law that do need to be changed, and I look forward to seeing that legislation come forward this year so that we can move forward with a robust craft brewery industry.
Right.
Yes, I will support legislation to grow the Maryland craft beer industry. It's an exciting business. There's all kinds of links to tourism. I believe the way we approach this is we start anew. We take this out of the political realm. We base this on fairness. I've had conversations with some of the committee members about this. I've had a conversation with Peter Francho and others that have been involved. Let's basically move away from what happened last session as far as the political part of it. Let's start anew. Let's base it on fairness. And I believe if we work together, we actually can make it win-win, and that would be the intention.
So I serve on Economic Matters Committee, and we have what's called Alcohol Bill Day. Well over 60 bills get heard. They're all state bills or local courtesy bills. So I have a track record of passing and helping pass hundreds of pro-alcohol bills and those that help the shore craft industry. Here's the problem. Politics got in the middle of an issue that the comptroller brought. I don't mind telling you that the comptroller made this us versus them. It was a win-lose. Try to make it a zero-sum game where we have to take from one entity, the distributors, and give it to another entity, the shore craft brewers and the craft brewers throughout our state. That is a loss politically. Here's the bill here, and the comptroller, aside from that, fought his own party and was never going to get this bill passed. I say this, and not tongue-in-cheek, I have a better shot at passing the comptroller's bill than the comptroller has passing his own bill because of how he acted in that regard. I'll be candid with you. We can support craft brewers, and it puts me in a difficult spot when we have leadership take those kind of actions by working with, as a Republican, a pro-business attitude that devoids itself of the politics that we saw last year. Bottom line.
All right. Yes, of course, we'll support our local brewers. We've already done that. The first bill we did was for Evolution Craft Brewing to double in size, to go from having to possibly lay off, 50 restaurant workers to now hiring up to 50 more people as they double their capacity to brew. And I look at Senator Mathias sitting out here in the first table. He literally held my hand with that bill our first session. I had no idea what I was doing, and so this bill took several different versions, and he had the same version in the Senate, and we did it all together. And so I see no reason why, we can't continue to do that. And, but I want to go back to the dollar draft night. Man, what were you, was this the 80s or something, man? I was in middle school, dude. Right on, man. Good for you, brother. I missed all that, so I see $3 draft night, and I think, wow, what a bargain. Another dollar, wow. But seriously, it's very important. It's very vital. You see what's going on with Evolution Craft Brewing, especially, and, Tall Tales out in Pittsville, and so, of course, we're going to continue to support it.
Well, out of all of that conversation, I think all I heard was Chris say that there's a day in Annapolis where they pick up the bill for all the alcohol. I think I might have misheard it here. Let's start with Senator Eckert, and we'll move down the line this time. Once again, legislation will be introduced concerning air emissions from chicken houses. This appears to be another effort to curtail poultry production in the state and cost Marylanders jobs. Please state your position on this kind of legislation, and do you support increased oversight and regulation of this vital industry?
Thank you very much. The poultry industry is a very important industry, as we heard again this morning here on the Delmarva Peninsula, and I think the industry has been good stewards. It's a family business, and they've been good stewards moving forward and being sensitive to changes in the economy and the business. With regard to air emissions from chicken houses, I think that's been one that's been kicked around for a long time. And no, we don't at this moment do that for every poultry house. There are standards in the industry that are required that do address that, and there are ongoing discussions, I believe, with the poultry industry and the Department of the Environment to determine some more specific studies. There have been some done. I do not have access to the results of those at this point in time, but I think it will be an ongoing discussion, and I think it can be dealt with without strict regulation through legislation.
I'll go back again to my original comments. This comes back to balance, and the approach with this air emissions bill is not the way to go. We obviously had some strategy sessions early on last session, even before the session started, with Purdue and the Delmarva poultry industry. I will be right in the middle of this issue, as I have been assigned to the Environment, Health, and Education Committee. There's a new chairman, Chairman Paul Pinsky. So I have already met with Mr. Randy Day at Purdue and with other Delmarva poultry industry leaders, and we'll continue to work with you so we can strike the balance.
When we talk about air emissions, the first thing that has to be explained to me is how can the state regulate where we have the EPA who regulates on these policies. So it doesn't surprise me that the state's trying, but the bottom line is you're trying to take away authority and control from the federal government in the process. So I could actually stop that answer right there and move the mic along, but I'll just take one opportunity to talk about how important poultry is. If we don't have Purdue, if we don't have Mount Air, Allen Hrim, if we don't have these organizations on the Eastern Shore, we're done. You can have an economic forecast summit like this, but it'll matter not one bit if we lose poultry. The bottom line is everything we do as a delegation is, generally speaking, pro-business, pro-jobs, working to help our environment, our economy, things that you've talked about today. Those conversations start and those conversations end with poultry and agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look around this room here and you see, everybody who has a business in here. I mean, how many steps removed are you from the poultry industry? You either have a direct interaction or you're one or two steps removed. You deal with employees that work for Purdue or work for Mount Air. So it's all intertwined, it's interconnected. I sat on the committee of jurisdiction when this bill came last year, and my concern was, there are studies being done now, testing being done now. Let's see what that looks like. before we do anything else. Maybe we're going too far. It's kind of like, with the Chesapeake Bay, we were able to hold the line on some things that were being proposed, and look, it's got the highest grades that it's had in 30 years, except for when it rains and the dam overflows from the Susquehanna. But other than Pennsylvania's stuff, we do very well for ourselves, and so I think, we need to see where we are when it comes to the testing that's being done to see if there may be a need to go forward or there may not. So I think just haphazardly, moving forward with something that may not be necessary is a waste of tax dollars.
Well, I don't support increased regulation in this. Again, we're back to decisions at a local level. Before serving on the council, I served on the Worcester County Planning Commission and defended poultry operations then, and will continue. One of the things that always bothered me was when you had an agricultural area and you had people coming in, building residential areas in those agriculture areas and then wanting the agriculture to conform, and that's not what that zoning was set for. So I think a level playing field with our neighbors in Delaware and Virginia will help Maryland as far as staying competitive in the poultry. And we have our work cut out for us.
So I've got big concerns with having a statewide mandate. So generally, I would say I'm flatly opposed. It just reminds me, running our family saloon, when we had a neighbor who didn't like us, and she used to call noise complaints all the time. And so I have to go out in the parking lot with the police, and then we get the noise meter, and we stand back by her house, and we redo the reading, and it'd be a certain number. And then we'd walk to the front of the bar, and we'd stand there, and the noise reading on the vehicles passing the front of the bar was louder than the noise that was behind the bar that we were being complained about. So, you're talking about some of these evaluations and scientific standards. I'm not comfortable with the proposals that have been put forward, and I haven't been convinced. There's some real problems with some of the suggestions. I don't think their intentions are wrong. I don't think anybody's trying to go after the poultry industry. I'm just saying I can't support that right now I can't support that. So.
Thank you. Certainly, as Carl mentioned, that we were on the committee and heard the hearings on this thing, and there's more air quality monitoring than was given credit for. But that's basically measuring emissions out of the air coming from power plants and things like that. So the whole study that was established last year in the legislation that would have been was a flaw to start with. The University of Maryland College of Agriculture and the Department of Agriculture in Maryland are going to work together to do some additional monitoring to see. But basically, at certain times, chickens smell. And you build a house next to it, it's going to smell. I'm sorry. And where was I going from there? But there's facts of life here, and the marsh smells as well, and it's emitting very much the same things as the chicken house is.
And we love chicken. I eat it every day. So I'm not aware of legislation that's being proposed this 2019, but I can speak to last year. The bill sponsor, Delegate Lewis from Baltimore City, I met with her recently, and I've actually asked her to come to the Eastern Shore, and she did, to learn more about the area, number one. That's important. You got to put in, if you're going to put in legislation, at least for me, that's what I believe in, that you need to know the area. But let me share this. The concerns where part of this is coming from is from the community. The community and locally right here are concerned about the air quality. And so we can't just overstep or overlook the fact that that is a concern. So with that being said, we need to continue to, and I have in conversations with the Department of Environment, I think they wanted to erect or re-erect their monitoring station on Nanticoke Road. So there are steps, there are movements going to happen. The other piece with the delegate, she indicated that she's not putting in that legislation this year because she wants to look at it holistically. Let's look at the issues that are in Baltimore City, Southern Maryland, and then also if there are some on the Eastern Shore. So, I mean, I know it's a touchy issue, but you know, there's ways to address it, and I know our poultry is our #1 industry here on the Eastern Shore.
Okay, for our last question and closing, if you will, we're going to start with Delegate Sample Hughes, and we'll come back the other direction. In a general term, please take your minute to explain as best you can, and in whatever terms you'd like, what steps you are going to take to help foster the business environment and the community on the Eastern Shore.
Well, again, it's important when we are aware, and you are aware equally, of what is going on, what the potential effects are at the state level, and the effects that you're seeing within your industry. So it's going to need to continue to be a two-way conversation. I don't want to go to represent this community without knowing and understanding what it takes for you to run your businesses, because I also understand and run a business of my own. So to that end, that part needs to continue to happen. The other piece that I will say, just on yesterday, I was in Kentucky, and I was on a panel dealing with persons with disabilities wanting to stay in the workforce, return to the workforce. And that is one area in particular I think our Chamber of Commerce across the nation could really understand more what programs are available at the federal level, at the local level, to ensure that persons with disabilities can return back to the workforce. They can bring positive aspects to your organization or to your company, and you might need to modify it. But we, as the federal government and the state government, can work together to help businesses to continue to thrive. But that is just one area of many I would like to have the continued conversations.
Well, I certainly will continue to listen to the Chamber and the Farm Bureau and other businesses in the areas to see their needs and concerns. But student training, employee training is a big part. I mean, we're building a new tech school in Westover. I hope it's going to fulfill and give the skills that the employees of this century and the next century are going to need to fulfill the employment opportunities. I mean, we have Rubber Set can't get enough people to file for another shift. They have 50 openings. The ECI has openings, tremendous openings there. And it's not a low pay grade deal. So we need to influence that and continue to work with Secretary Gill at the Department of Commerce and try to bring those job training programs here to our area, where we unfortunately are suffering from 6.1% and 6.1% in Worcester and Somerset counties and 4.8 in Wycomico versus the 3.6 in the state of Maryland. We still have opportunities here.
I agree. Workforce is a big deal, freeing up our workforce. Our Economic Matters Committee, the business regs come through our committee. Those burdensome regs, we're going to do everything we can to change them or stop them. The ones that have been put in place, like the paid sick leave, it really hadn't been enforced yet. We're going to keep working on that. That's in Annapolis. Here at home, we're going to keep working with our chamber, our local governments, and our local employers to try to help them grow. We still haven't gotten to the point we have enormous benefits, state benefits for people. We want to create the minimum wage. We need to end multi-generational poverty. Senator Eckert speaks to this much better than I. But we need to create the incentive and the opportunity for people to lift themselves up and grow, as well as businesses lifting themselves up and growing. I think that's one of our greatest challenges. So I'll be busy there and here. Thank you. God bless you. Merry Christmas.
I think there are a few things that we can do. We heard a few of them, and I mentioned a few. Some of these are redundant, but a trained workforce. When I go to some of our career and technology schools and see programs missing that are staples to construction and things like that, such as plumbing and electrical training, I think those are the kind of things that we could do to help. The number one complaint I hear from employers is lack of a trained workforce. I think favorable tax rates at all levels are important. It's not only the state level, it's what we can do at our county levels and our local municipalities as far as making it attractive. Keeping the decisions local, I've said that more than once. We know what's best, right here for us, what works across the bridge, not necessarily the case here. Fighting regulation. And a big thing is supporting new capital projects for some of our big economic drivers here, whether it be the university, UMES, Salisbury. I think that's a big part of it. Youth sports and travels, another component that I think we could possibly do some good with. The big thing, though, closing remarks, encourage people to speak positively. When I hear people talking about forecasting an economic downturn, predicting a recession in the future just because it's cyclical or whatever. We could talk ourselves into that, and I think we all need to remain, keep the talk positive and keep on a high note. Did you get that stick off? Love that.
Of course, workforce training, we have a lot of great people looking for jobs. We need to connect the dots. But the thing I hear in Annapolis a lot, I'm not sure if everybody's aware of what's happened in the past 4 years with the More Jobs for Marylanders Act and the RISE zones and all these different things that have been passed out of Annapolis to help foster growth on the lower shore in Western Maryland, Baltimore City, Prince George's County, areas that are lagging behind. And I'm afraid, because of the question I get asked now in Annapolis is, so what's the local government doing? Are they doing their part? Are they offering the same incentives? Because as you know, if your business is in Salisbury, for example, you're taxed 3 different times, city, county, and state. So if one piece, offers some, incentives or lowers some rates for you to thrive, you still have 2 more hurdles, of being taxed at a higher rate. And so unless those things all match, I don't know if we're going to see the full fruit of those seeds that were planted in Annapolis. And I don't know how much longer my colleagues in Annapolis are going to try to help us out if we're not doing our part as well locally. So I think it's incumbent that this filters its way all the way through.
If I might just answer this question about what I'm going to do by not talking about myself, we just had the most important state election in my generation. We re-elected Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican governor, who has demonstrated during his first 4 years the ability to work across the aisle, to work in a bipartisan fashion. Doesn't matter where the ideas are coming from, we bring those ideas forward for the benefit of the state of Maryland and our citizens. What I also recognize is that the next 4 years, with that same leadership, he's setting an example for everyone in the legislature. We need in Maryland, and have needed for a long time, divided government. Government that has to be responsible and accountable to the executive branch, but also to our people. We have a governor who's willing to stand and fight for us, give control back to the local counties, especially our rural counties, and in doing so, give our county councils, local municipalities, economic development leadership in these counties the ability to do their job without feeling like Annapolis is doing it for them. That's the most important thing that I can tell you, and I'll do everything I can to advance our governor's goals in that regard.
Thank you, and I'll continue the themes as far as the focus. I will stay focused on jobs and the economy. Whether you voted for the president or whether you voted for the governor or not, the fact is, let's take advantage of the fact that we have a president and a governor that are focused on jobs and the economy. It's very important for us, when I talk about these partnerships, that we come up with these consensus proposals or positions, and then we're in a stronger position to advance them. So I'm going to challenge all of you to stay engaged with us during the session. Certainly all of us here are going to use our committee positions to continue to promote jobs in the economy. I have already met with our Senate leader. I met with President Miller. He also will continue, he said, to support the poultry industry here. I'm going to continue. I have a meeting with the new chairman, Chairman Paul Pinsky, so I'll use my position on committee as well as my position being one of 47 in the Senate to work with you on the consensus position. So whether it's advancing a priority or trying to fend off bad legislation, we have to do it together.
Thank you very much, and I will continue some of what I've already been working on with regard to infrastructure, which translates into having adequate tools and resources for business development. That includes building out the broadband. We'll have a couple of pieces of legislation that will come forth with the broadband task force for the rural areas. Workforce initiatives. Don't underestimate the power of all the recovery activities that are taking place across the district, because there are people in recovery who are looking for jobs and will work. We also want to deal with putting back in the tax credit bill for airplane parts and repairs, modification of the opportunity zones to make sure that our rural areas have a system in place to be able to access that and it doesn't go to the metropolitan areas. The angel investor tax credit is another initiative. I'll work with our partners across the aisle to be able to see if we can get that realized wise for the Eastern Shore. And then, of course, our education. I think the question today, is it an expense or is it an investment? We will be looking at the Kerwin Commission and the results of that and how we move forward and how that sets the stage for workforce as well.
Something tells me we'll hear something about the Kerwin Commission at our next event. Ladies and gentlemen, if Greg Riddell, State Farm Agent, takes a position on something publicly, I'm going to irritate half the people I insure. Doesn't matter what it is. As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, it is our responsibility, it is a mandate that we do that lobbying for us, because you are all the Chamber of Commerce. It is not an unknown entity. It's not a bunch of blank faces. It is us. You will see a very significant presence by your chamber and the Government and Business Affairs Committee in advocating on behalf of the business community, on your behalf, so you don't have to. But I will also tell you, we need your help. I think you heard it in that last question. This is a group effort. It's not going to happen if someone else does it. It has to be us. The person leading the charge to help us drive that message home, I've referred to him before as the heart and soul of the Chamber of Commerce, and he's in large part that. He is also the hands. Bill Chambers.
I want to thank our legislators. Godspeed in Annapolis. All of you will be great leaders and representatives for us, and yes, you will be hearing from us on a variety of issues, as well as the other side of the aisle will be hearing from us as well. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, WBOC, Delmarva's News Leader, and their great team, all the sponsors, Chesapeake, all of you who have been with us. This has been a great event. We'll see you in April for the post-mortem, and we'll see you here at SU next year for the economic forecast. Thank you all. Drive safe. Happy holidays.